We are getting ready.
How is it possible to move the slides?
I will do for you.
Okay, perfect.
I do everything. Thanks for joining us for this first. Oh my God, I took the Spanish version of the of the symposium. Thanks for joining us for the session, parallel session 1A, the effects of automations in the world of work and its gender dimensions. We have some good time allocated, but yet we are starting late, and for many, including us, it's going to be up until late lunchtime. So we plan to do an introduction, the presentation, the 4 cases presentations. I will explain more in a little bit, and then we hope for a conversation afterwards, both from the people in the room and those of you, lots of you who have joined. We had some trouble join online. We had some trouble with sound in the previous session, so I please ask you, all those of you who are online, to keep your mics mute, but certainly we will welcome you to join us online when if you wanted to take the floor. So let me do the screen sharing. Let's see if it works. It doesn't. Then show all windows. Here we are. Share. And okay, I hope, yes, there you are. So this session is one of, presents the findings of one of the several sub-projects we have in this partnership with JRC, and funded and supported by the European Commission, the effects of automation in the automotive, apparel and footwear industries and their gender dimensions. And I would like to emphasize this last bit, the gender dimensions, because that was one of the drivers of our inquiry, but also the new things that we were hoping to find, to get findings with this project. So we know that the new technologies on work, and we've already started this conversation in the morning, are in the center of public and policy debates. And we also know that previous waves of technological change have featured both job creation and destruction dynamics, as well as the transformation of traditional roles and occupations included in the gender composition. And I will emphasize this, the occupations that we today think as feminized, for example, not necessarily was feminized in the past, and the reverse is also true for some occupations. For others, things seem to remain the same. So the question is how technological change may change work as we know it, and how it will affect different groups of workers, including women and men, in different industries and contexts. So we have a variation of industries, 2, actually almost 3, and context. For the variation in context is both European countries, as it was mentioned this morning, and also developing countries. So this research attempts to assess to which extent certain jobs and subcomponents of those jobs as tasks are routine and repetitive, and therefore easier to codify and automate. Yet, the less research has focused on understanding what is happening on the ground at the firm level and using qualitative approaches. And this is really the beauty of this project, that we've gone there. We've try to understood. Why? Because the idea of that something is routine and repetitive and therefore can be automated doesn't necessarily mean that ends up being automated. So we wanted to see all those other elements that result in automation or not automation: the relative capital labor cost, the availability of workers, the skills requirements, the infrastructure, the logistics, the decision making, meaning the actors there, the broader institutional setting, something Rick emphasized this morning, and also the structure of the global and local value chains. So the main objective of this project has been to improve our understanding on how ongoing process of technological upgrading, in particular automation, but not only, impact women's and men's employment and work more generally in these two industries, automotive and apparel and footwear. Why these two? And perhaps it is very obvious. The fact that they are highly integrated into global and regional supply chains, but they are at the center. I mean, we have so many stereotypes about these two sectors that are true in that sense. The almost fully robot, or the idea of robots that started in the autos manufacturing, and this robotized factory. I was 2 weeks ago in Mitsubishi in Japan, for example, no? And the whole idea, although there are people there, and I'm sure Jorge will tell us, they are workers, but on the other side of the spectrum, the apparel manufacturing remaining much more traditional and labor intensive, reliant on manual labor for sewing activities that we know are female dominated. So the project aimed to shed light on these issues, the following issues: whether or how the technologies introduced in recent years have impacted production processes and the organization of work in the levels of employment, again, at the firm level. The automation effects on the composition of the workforce, in particular, whether and how technological upgrades impact women and men differently, and the impacts of that technological upgrading on working conditions. So I would like to emphasize this because it is an issue, a methodological issue that I think is important before we go to listening to our speakers present their cases, is that we have several hypotheses that are put forth by the literature. For example, the fact that the more capital intensive production is, the less important it is to have low wages for workers, and therefore, as women are typically low wage, this would lead to a defeminization of employment. Also, gender norms designating men as main breadwinners and women as secondary workers would make men prioritize in hiring, and different skills requirements of industrial jobs that would fit more to the skills that men have and not women have. Again, as hypothesis, but we know very little. There is very little evidence about how these things play out in the actual firm at the work, at the shop floor level. So we wanted to get this evidence. We wanted to understand the decision-making processes that lead to these outcomes. And we also wanted to assess the gender impacts of automation of different tasks. Again, the association or not between capital intensity, the amenability to automation of certain tasks, and the share of women's employment. And this is my last slide, but as I said before, we have in-depth case studies built upon semi-structured interviews with all actors, employers, workers, and different level of management in selected establishments in Germany, Indonesia, Mexico, Romania, and Spain. Companies were selected if they had taken relevant steps in technological upgrading and automation. So we wanted a type of firm. We wanted to observe change as much as we could. And I want to emphasize this also, that whatever we observe, therefore, is something that occurs or has occurred within the firm and not between firms. So for those of you who worry about methodology, in a way, we are only seeing the success stories because the firms that close, we don't see them. So we have to have that in mind. Yet, even if this is a small sample, we believe that this approach is super complementary to what we know, and we know from quantitative studies. And we also know that we cannot generalize yet, as our qualitative research experts tell us. We can see patterns and see regularities that inform our policies. The last point is that we, as it was mentioned this morning, this started, I remember the meeting, an initial meeting in an office close to here, that was early March 2020, 1st or 2nd March of 2020. So the crisis, the COVID hit whilst we were starting this project. So that was also a challenge in some countries and sectors, to go and interview firms that had been under stress, to say the least, because of the COVID context. So this is my introduction. I will stop here, and I will pass the floor to our speakers. And first, we will have the presentation of the EU country automotive research by Margarita Russo. It's nice I have it in person, which
Thank you very much, Valerie, for the introduction. It is a great pleasure to be here after years of online meetings, so we can meet the other members of the team and the ILO coordinators. And the project was really challenging the possibility of a qualitative research aiming at a cross-country, cross-company comparison. And the selection of the companies in Spain, in particular, I refer on this country. The other two, Romania and Germany, have different characteristics. But focusing on Spain, we find the same selection bias, I would say, that we observed in the other countries, in the sense that we were focusing on companies that were significant for the matter of the study, but that were available to be analyzed. And that was not so easy. In Spain, we tried for several months to have answers from the OEMs with no positive possibility of going there. So we moved to tier suppliers, and that was at the beginning a second best, but it resulted to be a great opportunity, because in the cross-country comparison, we were able not only to view the perspective of the OEMs that are the final assembler of the product, but what happens in companies that are in the supply chain. And Spain is a very important company in the automotive industry, not only for the importance of the automotive production, but because they are supplier of important OEMs worldwide. So Spain is an important case study, and I don't know how can I move. Okay, but you okay? Thank you. And the two case study can be presented very briefly, just to share with you the fact that one is a tier 2 supplier, and it is a very, we can say, medium-sized company in Italy, but it is 220 employees. They produce car seat padding, specialist, very special, high resilience and viscoelastic molded foam. They are part of a multinational company, the Copper Group, with plants in Europe and outside Europe, and they produce for a tier 1 supplier of Opel plant in Zaragoza. The structure of the qualitative interviews were setting the companies in the context in which they operate. So for us, it was extremely important to understand the extent of connections with the parent company and with the other companies in the ecosystem in the decisions of the implementation of the different technologies they were adopting. And in the case of Copo, technical collaboration with the parent company R&D departments is extremely important. Which are the technologies that we were focusing? No, please go back.
Back, okay.
Okay, back to the Copo. The technologies, because obviously we couldn't describe all the technologies in a company, even in a small company, but it is important that they were implementing automation since many years, and that they were using automation and robots in the forming area. But what is important is the latest implementation of the technologies of digital visual inspection, that for them was extremely important to reach 0 errors. This is extremely important because they provide input for a tier 1 that is directly connected with the production, the assembly line in Opel. So errors can't be detected in a later stage, otherwise there will be great errors. Now, the point is that the other company had a completely different specialization, welding sub-assemblies, highly automated welding, but since many years, they introduced robots in welding 20 years ago. They are part of a German group, Linde EVM group, and they are a tier 1 supplier of Stellantis, Ford, and Mercedes-Benz. They are strongly embedded in their ecosystem in Zaragoza. I didn't mention that both companies are in the Aragon region, and in particular close to Zaragoza. The point is that beyond that complete robotization, they realized that the only way to increase the value added of that technique was to implement a completely different organization of production processes using manufacturing execution system to implement AGV. Why? Because in order to have the automation of transport of materials through among departments, they needed to control all the production process. And that was an important step of their change, because they started with the digital twin. So they needed to have a digital representation of their production process through which they could implement changes in the organization of work and production. Now, the technological upgrading that we observed had basically some drivers, increasing the efficiency of the production process, increasing productivity capacity utilization, and reducing waste time of robots and automatic handling. But the quality control, the 0 errors that I mentioned before, is absolutely crucial in the automotive sector because of this strong integration among the various stages of production phases done within the establishment and integrating pieces coming from directly in the line from outside. And the drivers was also to reduce the complexity of the production process by improving the information flows. Barriers are essentially in the implementation stage because the digital twin required a medium-term structural change to be organized and set within the company, and robots and changes in technology need more room. So they needed to reorganize completely the settings of the layout of the establishment, and they needed more competencies that they could have inside to design the technology. And in both cases, apart from the support that Corpo received from the parent company, the local ecosystem was absolutely essential. Skills that we found as a barrier, difficult, are not the specific technical skills that normally we consider, but are skills related to understanding how to interpret data, but we'll see in a while. And a barrier, I would say, or something to overcome, is the cultural shift, a new mindset, not only in the workers, but in the management and in the middle management. The shortage of skilled worker was relevant in both cases, but I would conclude with barriers that we didn't find evidence of data analytics for using the outcome of this important digital transformation they were implementing in correcting for failure or prediction of robots, devices, parts and components. So it was quite incredible the amount of resources, data as a resource they had, and the incredible low level of usage of those resources. Which are the labor impacts? Well, we have multiple dimensions, and obviously there was an improvement to work efficiency because obviously robots and most automation improve ergonomics of individual tasks, reduce the risk of heavy, dangerous and harmful jobs and repetitive tasks in some cases. But we observed that in not all cases it was possible because the need of more space for automation and robots. There was a job displacement, but in all the companies, we were quite in a difficulty in estimating the, I would say, the net effect, because there was an incredible change in internal composition of the workforce that was changing over time with a reduction and on some tasks and increase in other. We observed as an impact of the automation, a reduction of the takt time. The cycle time is shrinking, and there is a contemporary rising of the saturation of the process due to the overall impact of robots in terms of increasing productivity. And a critical area of work organization is job rotation. It was incredible because you had two sides. The management says, well, job rotation is fantastic. The trade unions say job rotation is a need for workers. And workers say, please, no, we don't want job rotation. Because with that takt time, with that compression of their times, if they do always the same job, they can at least leave their mind somewhere else and do the same things repetitively. So they don't accept job rotation. But this is something that deserves attention. We found temporary job contracts, and we were quite puzzled to observe them in Spain, where the new law reduced the amount of temporary jobs, but they were considered a standard, and they were employed in all the routine tasks, and they will be targeted for future automation. So no problem if they are temporary, they will be simply displaced. The increasing standardization of tasks was another effect, but I will stress the fact that manual dexterity still plays a crucial role. Now, how many minutes?
12.
Okay, perfect. Case study comparison. Common trends can be easily imagined, but I would stress the maintenance as an area that is increasingly important, and the career progression that is something that is done internally because difficulties in the labor market for skilled workers, and the fact that there was an incredible improvements in economics increased the female employment opportunities. Points of divergence. We found an important area that is decision-making at department level. So we observed that, just going back to the non-deterministic role of technologies, we found that in some departments and in some companies, technologies can be open to a completely different path. In decision-making, middle management can take real decision on how to organize the work in the department, relying on the real-time information provided by MES. So they rely on structural information and very well provided. So the point is that when you are in that condition, the person that are involved in taking decision must have a completely different training. They must know how to interpret data, but they must know how to work together with other people in the team. And that was a dimension that were creating very many steps to reach I would say, the output they were considering. So main conclusion. I would say that the main conclusion is that we were missing an important part of the story, because the qualitative research was involving a variety of roles within the company, and it was mandatory in our contract to interview workers. But it was not possible to interview workers because neither the management nor the trade unions allowed us to interview workers. That was something astonishing for us, but they were saying that, well, to some extent, workers had to be productive and not to give information for research that was not a productive area for them. So the missing perspective of line operator is something that must be considered in a different setting of the research. So we observed the working environment complying with regulations, so perfect, and the choice of new technologies taken for granted, not only from the management, obviously, but from trade unions. But what we observed in the cross-establishment comparison is that there is a great room for implementation in non-deterministic way. So implementation of automation, I want to skip to the most critical area of my conclusion, is that is far from being complete. It's uneven across the department and not fully integrated with digital technologies. So let me skip to the last points. Increase of mental stress is an important part that we have to consider carefully. We were not prepared with our background. We needed our expertise to deal this, and possibly we can't deal mental stress discussing with the management who simply ignore the issue. The other point is that we found a sort of limbo, workers in transition, workers waiting for full automation that will displace their tasks. And another point is that we found temporary workers, and those temporary workers are temporary in strict sense. In this, they work for 3 days, 5 days, because they are not employed for 3 or 5 days. Perhaps they are employed for 10 days, but as soon as they found somebody who employed them for 15 days, 20 days, they leave their job. So it's a waste of opportunities for the companies and for the workers as well. To conclude with this, that we need to consider that there is an open space for there should be, but okay, there is a Okay, the questions. I would say I would conclude with the negative, critical impact of automation, because there are elements that increase a gender divide in the sense that there is a commonplace dexterity, reliability of women, and there are social conditions that to some extent relegate women to some tasks. And given that there is an issue that the fragmented manual and repetitive tasks remain, and that they will be replaced by robots. So the point is, what will happen in the transition phase? We found that management asks for great commitment, a great proactivity of workers. But how can you be proactive and committed when your job will disappear in a while? How can you be satisfied when your work is exactly doing this movement with your hand inside the vehicle, just fixing a detail in the roof of a car? So what is the satisfaction of that kind of job? Should we care about satisfaction? And that is a critical point. And what are the penalties for workers who are to some extent had to move to a different job because they don't keep the pace of the takt time? It is the only condition, in only case in which I would say the individual condition is considered. They can't cope with that takt time. It's their problem. So they have to move somewhere else. What will happen to those workers? And it's a matter of size of the company that has enough tasks for marginal workers, and what happens for the worker who is marginalized. So that's my concluding point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margherita. Lots of food for thought. I will pass the floor to Jorge Carrillo, who will present the research of automotive sector in Mexico. And whilst I'll do that and you start, I do all the...
Well, good morning. First of all, I want to thank you, Fernanda Barcia and Guillaume Delotre, for inviting me to participate in this research. This allow me to follow in my own research and go into very in deep in the companies. So it was a really a pleasure to participate in that. Saying that is not always we have the opportunity to speak in our mother language. So we have the opportunity now because we have a very good interpreters. So I'm going to switch to Spanish. So please, whoever you know Spanish, please go with the headphones. ¿Puedes pasar a la siguiente? Gracias. Ya se explicaron los objetivos. Solamente diré, igual que Margarita, que fue it was very challenging entrar en estas empresas porque es muy difícil que acepten las condiciones para hacer un estudio, no para hacer una visita, sino para hacer entrevistas y pasar mucho tiempo dentro de la empresa. Eso es bien complicado y bueno, creo que fue uno de los principales logros en el caso mexicano. Tengo más de 40 años visitando empresas y bueno, pasó por todo the lawyers of the corporative. So fue realmente algo increíble que nos hayan aceptado. La siguiente, por favor. El contexto es sumamente importante para poder entender estos procesos, se dijo en la mañana y lo mencionó también Margarita. México tiene mucha importancia en el sector automotriz, algunos le llaman la gasolina de la economía, no solo por el ranqueo en el que se encuentra mundialmente, sino por la amplia difusión de empresas en todo el país. Prácticamente todas las OEMs se encuentran ahí. las chinas están agresivamente entrando, Tesla está por entrar, es decir, continúa un proceso de crecimiento. La gráfica que ustedes ven es algo importante para que se mantenga en nuestra mente, y es que desde que empezó digamos, esta liberalización de la economía y todo este patrón, México participa en la integración fuertemente con Estados Unidos y Canadá, y esto hace que tenga un rol fundamental en el crecimiento de esta industria. Entonces, si lo vemos a lo largo de los años, se ve claramente cómo la producción crece y crece paralelamente el empleo. Y la parte verde que ustedes pueden observar, ¿sí se ve verde? Sí, sí se ve verde, son la percepción de mujeres, que es algo también poco común en la industria de las autopartes en México. Desde luego en la maquila de autopartes hay muchísimas miles de mujeres, pero en el caso de las OEMs, de las ensambladoras finales, había muy pocas y cada vez son más y más. Eso es importante recalcar. Estamos hablando de aproximadamente 1 millón de trabajadores. La siguiente, por favor. En términos de los resultados de este estudio, bueno, las características generales, digamos, que vale la pena resaltar, es que tomamos 2 empresas que fueran contrastantes en términos de cuándo llegaron, en qué ola de industrialización llegaron. Y una tiene más de 3 décadas y una tiene solamente 3 años, en diferentes regiones del país, obviamente dedicadas principalmente a la exportación a Estados Unidos y a Canadá, a Estados Unidos fundamentalmente. Son, independientemente de su nivel de tecnología, son intensivas en trabajo. Este es un hallazgo que es ampliamente, digamos, conocido en el caso mexicano. Las multinacionales, ahora sí que it doesn't matter if it's service or manufacture, todas son labor intensive, todas. No importa si es con trabajo poco calificado o altamente calificado. Entonces, bueno, se cumple este patrón. Tienen sindicatos fuertes, pero sindicatos de mucha tradición en México, muy criticados a algunas ocasiones, pero cooperan mucho con las empresas. Entonces, es una situación, es un contexto muy distinto al de muchos países, no solo al de España, sino a otros. Eso es algo importante. Y bueno, algo que también vale la pena mencionar es, independientemente que en México está prohibido el outsourcing, el labor outsourcing, con la nueva administración, 51% de los trabajadores que estaban dentro de estas empresas eran outsourcing, porque hay industrial campuses que están al lado con 16, 20 proveedores trabajando en el just in time, y bueno, muchos de los trabajadores están dentro de las plantas, lo cual es algo pues muy llamativo. La siguiente, por favor. La tecnología, ¿qué es lo que vimos? ¿Qué es lo interesante? Bueno, ya sabíamos que cuando hablamos de soldadura, pues está robotizado, que generalmente siempre está robotizado, que la pintura está robotizada, está automatizada. Pero bueno, fue interesante observar que stamping, bodywork and painting concentran más del 70% de los robots en las 2 empresas. Pero los robots están a lo largo, digamos, de los diferentes segmentos. Los procesos automatizados depende de la actividad, pero también están muy generalizados, y cada vez más está entrando la digitalización, particularmente para el área de logística. Imagínense ustedes las miles de partes, componentes que todos los días están entrando en este campus y que necesitan trucks. Por ejemplo, en una de las plantas 100 trucks entregan y reciben componentes para poder ser en máximo de 2 horas entregados en la empresa, con un ritmo muy alto, ¿no? Entonces está muy generalizado, digamos, el proceso de de automatización y digitalización y particularmente los robots, como dije, en algunas áreas. Hay diferencias sustantivas. La principal diferencia es que Foro Hermosillo empezó muy automatizado hace 36 años y ha ido aumentando y aumentando y aumentando. No obstante, el empleo también sigue creciendo, no al mismo ritmo, pero sigue creciendo. La otra empresa, por ser más joven y por tener otra visión, empezó más despacio su proceso de robotización y ahora lo está haciendo de una manera más fuerte. La siguiente, por favor. Acerca de la famosa 4.0. Obviamente en estos procesos de robotización, sobre todo con los robots colaborativos, bueno, entran, digamos, en toda esta nueva tecnologías asociadas a la 4.0, pero algo que nos llamó mucho la atención es, digamos, la diferencia en ambas compañías en la estrategia de cómo implementar estas tecnologías. Mientras que para Ford hay una visión global, pero ya en concreto estamos hablando de robots colaborativos y bueno, ahora con la realidad aumentada, etcétera. En el caso de Toyota en esta planta en Guanajuato, fundamentalmente lo que hacen es desarrollar su propia tecnología para solucionar un problema. Entonces tienen una estrategia muy clara que es no queremos múltiples soluciones, sino solo una, y tenemos que desarrollarla nosotros. No es simplemente traer expertos de otras empresas o el corporativo o del mercado, sino desarrollarlo nosotros. No queremos black boxes. Y para ello, de manera interesante, hay una colaboración con la universidad local, en este caso la Universidad de Querétaro, y forman un engineering team entre las dos empresas, entre la universidad y la empresa, para desarrollar proyectos que tienen que ver con la detección, prevención y predicción de errores. Errores que existen en las líneas de producción, que están relacionadas con la rebaba de soldaduras, que están relacionadas con el software o que están relacionados con espacios que no pueden entrar las personas porque son lugares confinados, y entonces crearon precisamente los robots AGB, que allá les llaman ABC, pero ABS, perdón, pero es lo mismo. Entonces, es interesante cómo la implementación de estas puede ser diferente. Interview, la siguiente, eso. Acerca de los resultados de nuestras entrevistas, al igual que señaló Margarita, son, digamos, básicas las explicaciones que podemos dar, cuáles son los drivers para la automatización y la digitalización, y en este caso los hemos dividido en tres: económicos, sociales y de medio ambiente. Y los económicos, pues sí, claro, tienen que ver con la eficiencia, la productividad, pero algo muy importante, la consistencia. Porque el hecho de meter robots y aumentar el pace rate, ¿no? de la actividad, del número de horas por automóvil o número de minutos, que lo que sea. Entonces, eso es muy importante, esa consistencia, y por lo tanto es un driver fundamental. En términos sociales, pues sí está relacionado sobre todo con los riesgos en el trabajo y digamos, la ayuda que significa, es un trabajo muy pesado, ¿verdad? Todo esto, entonces la ayuda que significa todos estos nuevos equipos, digamos, para poder hacer el trabajo más accesible para hombres y obviamente para mujeres. Y la cuestión ambiental, que está asociada sobre todo en las áreas de pintura, los departamentos de pintura, no solo por la importancia de digamos, el mantener el consumo de agua y no generar más desperdicio, sino también en términos de las emisiones, ¿no?, de carbono. Entonces, están muy enfocados en estos y son diferentes tipos de drivers. importante, no son aislados. O sea, no es que, o sea, hay que entenderlo como una configuración tecnológica que es lo que permite estas divisiones. En términos de las barreras, contrario a lo que dijo Margarita, por lo menos en términos de las entrevistas, no fueron evidentes, digamos, las barreras, sino más bien los challenges, ¿no? Los retos. ¿Por qué? Porque son en México, por este proceso de industrialización que continúa, hay un turnover, una rotación en el trabajo muy alta. Entonces, es todo un issue mantener a la gente. Y además, no es un trabajo que fácilmente pueda uno entrar, contratar a alguien y meterlo a trabajar el primer día. No, exige mucha capacitación, exige mucha responsabilidad, mucho involucramiento. En ese sentido, hay un reto de no perder gente del staff, sobre todo también de los ingenieros o de gente muy calificada, porque otras empresas pues compiten por ellos. Ya estamos en 15. Bueno, la siguiente, simplemente resumo diciendo que hay, ya dije que había una inclusión, hay una cuestión salarial que a pesar de las diferencias de olas de industrialización, son muy comunes ambas empresas en términos de su organización. Obviamente son lean manufacturing, lean management, ¿no? Todo esto, y los salarios, curiosamente, son muy semejantes, más o menos andaremos entre los $5 o $6 si contamos todos los beneficios, pero bueno, entonces el impacto en el empleo es que no hay un desplazamiento de trabajadores cuando entran los procesos de robotización y de automatización, sino lo que pasa es que son reubicados dentro de la empresa. Se les da nuevo entrenamiento si es necesario. Muchos de los que se quedan en los mismos puestos pues, tienen que ser reentrenados por las nuevas tecnologías, y entonces esto es lo que se ve claramente. La siguiente, por favor. Las percepciones sobre la automatización, sobre todo, fueron muy positivas, tanto de los trabajadores, tanto de los trabajadores entrevistados, del sindicato, de los ingenieros y de la gerencia. Ahí está lo que se menciona, el incremento del production rates, la eliminación de los riesgos de trabajo, o bueno, la disminución, y decía yo, la eficiencia y sostenibilidad. En todo caso, la visión negativa, el impacto negativo es la pérdida de calificación y sobre todo de autonomía en muchas decisiones, pero los trabajadores están conscientes que es inevitable en esta industria estar en este proceso de tecnología. Paso a la última para decir simplemente que hay después como conclusión dos diferentes configuraciones. Ahí están los datos de número de robots, empleo, etcétera, lo cual fue algo, pues realmente se ven muy sencillos esos datos, pero conseguirlos y que los apruebe la empresa, porque no eran 126 robots, eran 127, ¿no? O sea, es muy importante esta información, muy valiosa. Y lo que podemos observar entonces es que hay dos patrones, un patrón de Toyota diferente al de Ford. Ford, digamos, tuvo un rápido proceso de robotización y de automatización y ahora se mantiene constante, y entonces está enfocado en mayor productividad y mayor empleo. Mientras que Toyota, por el contrario, como venía de un proceso mucho más atrasado en términos tecnológicos, atrasado quiere decir de la difusión del número de robots, etcétera, la intensidad de robots es mucho mayor, relativamente mucho mayor en Toyota que en Ford, pero mantienen más tranquilo la productividad y el empleo. Es decir, la estrategia de empresa importa. Yo ahí lo dejaría por los minutos. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Jorge. Mientras, no sé ustedes, pero yo ya estoy pensando en los temas comunes, en la comparación. Voy a pasarle la palabra a Shiva Tejani, nuestra colega que está online y que va a ser la primera de las dos presentaciones que vamos a tener on apparel and footwear sobre Indonesia. Shiva, are you ready to share your screen?
Yes, hello, I am. Can you see it?
Yes, but now you, excellent. All
Okay.
set, thank you. You have
Okay, perfect.
15 minutes.
Okay, wonderful. So hello, everybody, and thank you very much for having us present to you today. I will try to stick to the time. And we are, I'm actually making the presentation on behalf of my co-author, David Kuchra, as well. So we studied automation and its impact on the gender distribution of employment and gender division of labor in apparel and footwear in Indonesia. And so to give you some sort of background and context for this study, we were interested are motivated to do this qualitative study because a number of quantitative studies find that there is a negative relationship between automation and technological upgrading / automation and the female share of employment in manufacturing. And there can be many reasons for this, such as the gender typing of jobs as feminine or masculine, job rationing that is particularly salient during times of deindustrialization, the lack of skills, lack of job training, and lack of willingness of firms to invest in women's training, in particular due to their higher turnover. So in Indonesia, we wanted to investigate how automation affects the gender division of labor in supplier firms that are integrated into apparel value chains and what the automation itself is driven by. So in the research design, we studied 4 factories, 2 apparel and 2 footwear. And our focus was on non-knit apparel because knit apparel is already widely automated. And we conducted factory visits and semi-structured face-to-face interviews with a range of employees and workers, as you can see here. And the workers were chosen by management, which was unfortunate, but this was the only way that we could arrange them without disrupting the workflow. But there was still a premise of anonymity, both for the factories and the individuals. So there were 5 roughly 1-hour interviews for each that were transcribed and translated into English where needed. So in terms of the research design, we used a purposive sampling design, which is non-representative and looks at the extreme or deviant cases or the best in practice regarding technology adoption, because we know that apparel and footwear have typically been laggards in automation. So we really wanted to see the firms that were kind of ahead of the curve in this sense. And we looked at large modern factories, 3 of which were producing for large retailers in the US and Europe. The 4th one was only producing for the domestic market in Indonesia. Again, 3 of the 4 factories were in Better Work programs, the ILO's Better Work program, which means that they would generally have a higher level of compliance to working conditions. Although, we need to situate these case studies in context of the wider literature and the industry in Indonesia, we're going to skip over that and just focus on the results of the interviews. So I'll talk about the apparel firms first. So we had 2 apparel firms. One was an underwear factory and the other was a sportswear factory. The first one produces primarily bras, but also lingerie. It's a very large factory with 90% women, and it has moved from Greater Jakarta to Central Java to capture lower minimum wages in the latter. The sportswear factory produces outdoor apparel and sportswear. It's comparatively smaller, but still dominated by women workers. And again, there was a move. There was a second factory that was set up in Central Java for the same reasons I mentioned earlier. So despite some differences, the production process in both firms is quite similar, involves spreading the fabric, cutting and sewing. The cutting of the fabric is largely digitized, but manual cutting is still used. The underwear factory also has molding operations as well as automated strapping and hooking. Fabric spreading that is automated is just being introduced. The sportswear factory has automated fabric spreading and an automated hanger system that delivers cut pieces of fabric to different sewing stations on the shop floor. And as you might expect, cutting is predominantly men and sewing is predominantly done by women. There is more of a gender balance in the strapping and the automated hanger system supervision. So in terms of recent automation, the first process to be automated was fabric cutting in the underwear factory in 2017, followed by the strapping and hooking. And these have really contributed to increases in productivity. So cutting, for instance, increased, sort of doubled output per worker, has produced less waste, more precision in operations. Strapping and hooking has also reduced the number of workers that are required. Apart from the automated hooking, the sewing is still done by conventional sewing machines. For the sportswear factory, the fabric cutting machine, or rather fabric cutting operations were automated in 2017. Again, this has reduced the number of workers required for this process from 3 to 2, and output by the machine is 3 times higher. In terms of the automated hanger systems that were introduced, within a few year gaps, we see similar kinds of increases in productivity, where there are fewer workers required, and generally there's higher output because the machine is kind of driving the process and kind of keeping data about workflow. Okay, I already mentioned that. Let me go on to the drivers of automation. So of course, increased competition is driving the need to keep costs low, and automation is being used as a way to do that. There is also pressure on buyers to comply with CSR initiatives as well as national and international labor laws. In apparel firms, we also found that constrained factory floor space was an important factor for firms who wanted to increase productivity and output and better use the shop floor for this because land is expensive. Improved product quality and lower rejection rates also help in firms keeping up with competition. There's greater worker safety in automated cutting. And as I said earlier, the hanger system also helps to monitor the workflow and tasks done by workers. So some of the bottlenecks to automation in apparel are that in sewing, the pliability of fabric and the short seam lengths for bras is an issue for the machines. And for cutting, the slippery and delicate fabrics and short fabric runs also poses a challenge for the machines. And in both factories, one of the overriding concerns was the high cost of the machine. So as you can see, these are really expensive. And the output and the gains to productivity are closely studied before implementing any such machine. And of course, return on investment is a prime consideration. Excuse me. So in terms of impacts on employment, we found that there was labor displacement at the task level, but not at the factory level. And the underwear factory actually increased the number of workers who were working during the past few years when automation was introduced, whereas the sportswear factory, the number of workers held steady. So the displaced workers were not let go of, they were shifted to different operations. Many of the workers who are working on the automated machines are previous hires who received in-house training on this. And there's no clear-cut relationship between higher wages and operating automated machines or promotion. And we generally see that there's a compressed wage structure. Some workers did express a preference to working on automated machines because they thought it was not as complicated. And we found some evidence that the automatic hanger systems might be increasing work intensity, because the targets themselves are set at higher levels. So in terms of gender division of labor, in the interviews repeatedly mentioned that women and men are treated equally, but then, in other conversations, they would make statements, as you can see, that there was some very strong gender stereotypes about what men and women are good at doing. So that was something that sort of came across quite clearly in the interviews. And there was concern expressed, for instance, that cutting machines are dangerous, so men can handle that, and women are better suited for sewing, etc. Let me move on to the next. So let me talk now about the footwear firms. So to describe the footwear firm as the footwear firms quickly, there was one sandal factory that we studied, and another was a sports shoe factory. So the sandal factory produces sandals and slippers for men, women, and children. And this is the factory that had some export before, but after COVID was doing only domestic retailing. It has 900 employees, also mostly women, established in 1978 in Banten in Tangerang province in Banten. And the sports shoe factory is producing for a large international brand and exporting to the US and Europe. Much larger factory, and that is also located in Central Java and is primarily women, though lower share of women than apparel. So footwear production consists of three parts, which involves producing the sole, cutting and stitching the upper, and then attaching both of them to make the final product. The sandal factory uses an injection machine for soles, but the sports factory uses a rubber extension and hot press machine for it. These are then printed with designs and logos, mostly manually. For the uppers, fabric is cut, embossed, and then these components are then put together and sewn to make the upper or the strobel. Then the strobel is molded with the universal pressing machine to give it a three-dimensional shape. And then the soles and uppers are assembled together with lower cement and then put through an oven and a pressing machine to secure the bond. So the heavy and the dirty work is often done by men. But women are doing a lot of the manual cutting, sewing, and attaching, but of smaller children's shoes, and placing them in boxes. So in terms of the recent automation, the sports shoe factory implemented semi-automatic sewing machines that can sew many components after placing them on a pallet and inputting the design. They also implemented an auto traveling head cutting machine that has moving dies that can cut through many layers of fabric. They have a laser cutter that cuts delicate fabric using a laser beam after inputting the design. There's a digital printer for more complex and colorful designs. They also have a no-sew machine for welding shoes without sewing them. The sandal factory actually has not done much automation. It has some semi-automatic sewing machines, and it has an automatic cutting machine to cut label tags that are then sewn into its products. So some of the drivers of automation here are, of course, the rising minimum wage as well, and the need to increase productivity and to create the capacity for more labor-intensive tasks that can't be automated. So the sports shoe factory also has a policy of not laying off workers, so they simply move workers to more labor-intensive tasks once they're doing some other tasks with automated machines. Then there are product-driven requirements, special types of shoes that require certain kinds of automation. And then there's a problem of availability of skilled labor in Indonesia as well. So I'm going to speed up because I'm running out of time. But so some of the bottlenecks to automation here are, again, the technical limitations of machines, the issue of cost and risk that we also talked about earlier, and I think the fact that labor costs also remain low in Central Java is one of the bottlenecks as well. So in terms of the impacts on employment, again, there was labor displacement at the task level. We don't have clear evidence that there was any labor displacement at the factory level. Working hours were reduced, especially for semi-automatic sewing. And automation has allowed the sportswear factory to expand its product offerings and cater to new demand. Again, there is no clear-cut relationship between earning more if you operate automatic machines, and there's a compressed wage structure in footwear firms as well. Again, workers sometimes state that they find it easier to work with automated machines, but it requires faster hand movement. Hands are sore, needles can break and injure the eyes on semi-automatic sewing machines. There's also some evidence, or again, on rising work intensity, for instance, on the injection machine, where the speed is set at very high levels. So in terms of the gender division of labor, again, in footwear, we found a similar thing as in apparel, that the managers say that women and men are treated equally. But in the sandal factory, for instance, they talked about women's psychological traits. They are more attentive to detail. There's also apparently a supply side problem in that women are the ones who are applying for more sewing jobs. And in cutting and extrusion, again, it's assumed that men have greater physical strength. Attaching and molding is also a masculine job because it requires a lot of energy. And automation has changed the gender division of labor somewhat in the sports shoe factory. There's been a de-skilling of sewing, which has led to more men on the sewing lines. Men are also applying for sewing jobs more, but women still outnumber them. The hot press machines are being operated by women to a larger extent now, because it's easier to operate, but laser cutting and automatic head cutting are operated by men with engineering degrees, which is a cause of concern because of gender segregation in education, and all mechanics that are hired will now need to be computer and program literate. So just to quickly conclude, we saw that the drivers of automation were primarily the fact that minimum wages were rising, and this is also related to the location of firms, and perhaps firms will also think about relocating to a different region in Indonesia if wages rise in Central Java, for instance. There was the issue of competition as well as product requirements. Automation was somewhat limited, but the study also helped us to understand what the bottlenecks of automation were more clearly. And one of them is that the risks of adopting new technology are mostly borne by the supplier and not the buyer. And to kind of recap, there is evidence of displacement at the task level, but not at the factory level for both apparel and footwear. And the rationale for the gender division of labor seems to be weakening or breaking down as a result of automation, but there is a clear path dependence to the pattern of gender division on the shop floor, because if some tasks have been masculinized or feminized in the past, they tend to remain so over time. And there is also a persistent use of gender stereotypes to allocate and structure tasks. The fact that technical qualification is going to be a requirement to operate new automatic machines can exclude women going forward, and that remains a matter of concern. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiva, very, very much. We have now our last case, which is, sorry about this, which is, it's only to create some. So it is Simona Moldova, who is going to present the apparel research, but now for Germany. That means one of the EU countries we worked on. And I'll share the screen while you start.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity of presenting these results here. I would like to highlight a little bit the challenges that the previous speakers have identified in trying to enter the establishments and have these field visits and interview employees. Nevertheless, it's not really in comparative when we analyze automotive sector, because we are talking a little bit about smaller companies. So I will just go to the subject, maybe to the next slide. So the two establishments are located in Germany. Maybe you can click it again. Okay, in the north of Germany. I would like to highlight the small dimension of the companies. Apparel in Europe, it's very different than other industries. So the first establishment focuses on producing products of apparel, let's say similar to t-shirts, and we can see that there is a division of task distribution among the departments of the production departments. So sewing mainly dominated by female workers, meanwhile the management and more technological tasks dominated by male workers. Meanwhile, the second establishment, it's a bit bigger. It's a part of an international chain of establishments that they produce in different parts of the world, but they have decided recently to reshore this establishment in Germany with the aim of fully automating the production process. I highlighted here the equality in gender distribution in tasks, but I would like to make a special note that the decision of locating the establishment in that specific zone in Düsseldorf in Germany was counting also on the industry, on the type of workers that they are there with their specialization. And they do count with a great number of immigrant workers that are specialized in manually producing these garment and apparel products. They are also specialized in one single type of product, and they are jeans. If we go on to the following slide, I would like to present in a more visual manner the difficulty level in automating the specific tasks and processes in the manufacturing process, and highlight this very transitioning stage that the industry finds itself in. And it counts with a lot of manual tasks, a little bit more mechanized and more upgraded technology, and finally some automated processes. And if we go further with the slides, and one more slide, I will try to present in a little bit of a comparative manner the automated processes encountered in these two establishments. So we can see that in one of the establishments, the most recent one, we start even with the warehouse that is already robotized, and then it's connected with the following stage. You can just click it with the cutting and design stage that are completely automated in both of the establishments. And here, if you click one more, we can observe some specific type of automated cutting machine for specific processes or for specific products. Further, in the sewing stage, when we click once more, we observe that we all know for sure that this is the least automated and most difficult to automate section in the manufacturing process in this industry. And most of the establishments do work with this automated cutting of yarn and programmable stewing at a specific length by the sewing machines. It's really important to highlight that in these two establishments there is a very close relationship with technology manufacturers. And if we do 2 or 3 more clicks, we can observe some specific machineries related to sewing in a more automated manner. It's another special note, it's that in these two establishments, they have created this new job dedicated to technology, automation implementation specialists. And they do have strong collaborations with university and technology producers in order to try to cover the gap of low development of technology in this sector. Further steps, we can highlight low levels of automation in the two companies. So this image highlights the most automated parts of the production process. So where we do see the gaps, we count with the very manual tasks in development of the in production. Also, digitalization is proportional to the level of automation, as most automated are the machineries. Technologies included in the production processes more digitalized, more easier controlled by the companies in terms of data collection, in terms of monitoring and supervision of workers and efficiency. I don't know if that's good or bad. Good for the companies and maybe not so interesting for the workers. After having in mind this image on the automation of the production processes in both establishments, I would like to present on the further slide the drivers and barriers. I have organized them into 3 factors that, depending on the perspective that we are analyzing them, they become a driver and a barrier. So let's start with the technology availability. In the specific context of Germany, as previously mentioned, there is this close relationship with technology providers. So for these establishments, this represents a driver. Meanwhile, considering the gaps that we have seen in the previous image, there are technologies that are not developed yet. So that can become, on the other hand, the great barrier of not being capable of automating the complete process. Costs, on the other hand, can be a driver if the management or the implementing team sees the long-term benefits, which are translated into profits due to this increased efficiency that automation should provide to the company, increase of productivity and quality. Meanwhile, considering these different levels of development of technology, it gives them a very increased cost for purchasing, implementation, maintenance that companies have not foreseen before. And we should consider that we are talking about a low benefit industry, this garment and apparel and footwear manufacturing industry. And finally, I would like to highlight the lack of specialized personnel. On one side, we have the lack of specialized personnel in performing the manual tasks, for example, a seamstress or for the cutting tasks. So it is considered that automation may convert this task into more attractive tasks for the possible employees. Meanwhile, there is a lack of specialized personnel in manipulating this type of automated or upgraded technology. So this is forcing the companies to provide training to the employees or to hire very or highly specialized workers for manipulating this very upgraded machinery. I would like to go to the next slide and present the impacts on jobs and tasks. For example, the first one is standardization. Already the production process in the textile industry has a certain level, counts with a certain level of standardization, but by automating it, it increases more efficiency, it increases the order of the execution of the tasks and the steps, and it sets up the operational tempo. This has impact on the autonomy of the workers. As more automated the production process, the autonomy of the workers proportionally generally decreases, and also on the work rhythm. This may generate a pressure and an impact on a worker needing to fulfill with this pace of work. Then going on and approaching the task complexity levels, I'm going again with the double perspective here. And I would like to first indicate task simplification that has been observed for these more, when we are talking about the replacement of these more dangerous, these physically intense tasks that require a lot of strength, a lot of force, and they're like more repetitive. They call them even dumb tasks and boring tasks. So here we talk about this simplification of tasks. And on the other side, we can talk about task complexity. If the machinery is very difficult to operate, if it involves hiring of highly specialized personnel that has this expertise on developing, on operating and manipulating this machinery. When referring to task complexity increase, the work of the employees converts into more supervisory tasks. It gives them more responsibility, and thus, from the management point of view, it gives them the capacity of supervising even more robots, even if they're more complex. So this generates an increased pressure, an increased level of responsibility on the worker. And also, as has been already mentioned, a job rotation has been also facilitated. But it was observed mainly to this when it occurred this task simplification, because in this task simplification, it is sufficient just this training in-house that is provided by the companies. So the company can decide to offer this training to the employees, and then they can provide this, and they can allow this job rotation. Here, maybe we can touch a little bit the element of gender, that if the company provides the training to whatever employee, this employee can, we can eliminate somehow, we can reduce, let's say reduce, not eliminate, these gender differentiations in task attribution. Of course, as previously mentioned, another impact of automating the production process is the creation of these new tasks and jobs attributed to automation. Considering these very specialized operators of machinery, considering specialized maintenance for the different types of automated technologies. And also, there are some tasks, some jobs that are related to the machinery, but must be developed by the human hands. So somehow we do not lose this need for workers intervening with the machineries. When analyzing, monitoring, and evaluation and control of work, it's strongly connected to digitalization. And this is also connected to the level of automation implementation in the companies. More automation, more digitalization. So it has been considered that this control is a little bit more indirect. And this is what I was mentioning previously, that it's very good for the company that they can identify easily which worker is not so efficient or not accomplishes their objective easily, and maybe generating a bit of pressure on workers that must accomplish with this pace of work and must accomplish the objectives in the specified time. Maybe you could go to the following slide. When we could talk a little bit about career prospects. I would like to highlight here again this transition characterization of the industry. So career prospects may have an indirect impact on a company when automation would help increase volume production. So increasing volume production, we will need more workers in supervising this machinery and organizing the work in the production. Also, in terms of career prospects, we could highlight the training that I also mentioned before, and that could increase the specialization of a worker and could promote development. This training element is very mandatory. It has been indicated that it's critical, it's essential, and it's very costly for the companies, but they have to do it. Now, when referring to the health and safety aspects, and when approaching ergonomics, I'm going again with this parallel, with this double perspective. There is this positive impact with the elimination or replacement of the dangerous tasks and physical intensive tasks, but we can talk about also a negative impact, that the person has a more static position, has to concentrate more to keep up with the work pace. So this implies more concentration. So a negative impact on the employees. In terms of safety of the workplace and work environment health, it's connected with the better way of producing the machinery, with least emissions, with integrated safety system. So we can overall say they have been partially improved. Why I say partially? Because we don't have a complete automated production system in this industry. If we go further on the following slide, I would like to highlight some common trends that have been previously presented, and the most common is this creation of the specialized jobs attributed to automation, this mandatory training that everyone is mentioning, increase of standardization with the chain benefits that it brings either to the company and somehow to the workers. Health and safety partially increased. What it's really interesting in the German establishment is this collaboration with machinery producer that results from this innovation attitude. And this innovation attitude results from understanding the automation benefits in long term for both the company and the workers. As points of divergence, there's so many, but the most important are referring to the decision-making related to the implementation of automation in the production processes, and it's a lot related to financial possibilities, to access to private versus public funding on the companies, and have this support. This differentiation in digitalization in the production process due to the different levels of automation, and why these different levels of automation between manufacturers. It's strongly dependent on the type of the product they produce. If it's a single product produced in high volumes, it's much easier and much accessible, the automation of the production process. But if we talk about a product that changes the fashion every 2 months, there are so many colors and so many types of products that are produced, it's more difficult to standardize the production process. And I think I have a last slide with the conclusions. Yes. I'm always insisting with this transition stage. the industry is lacking of technologies. And I would like to highlight that from the 3 study cases in Europe, Germany, Romania, and Spain, Germany counts with the highest level of automation. And if you click it one more time, I have played with animations here. Okay, now I don't see from far away. The implementation of automation. It's this connection with the transition element that still has to be developed. This proportionality between digitalization and automation implementation, and one main conclusion on 2 scenarios on worker specialization. Either we talk about highly specialized workers able of operating and manipulating very advanced machineries. Either we talk about workers with no specialization, for which training in-house is sufficient and compulsory, and this is also connected with the job rotation. Secondly, the innovation attitude of the management team in the establishment, complemented with financial means, leads automatically to automation that was drastically observed in the study cases. There are these drawbacks. Even in this case, there are drawbacks, and they are really related with the development of technologies. It's very immature, the technology in the garment, apparel, and footwear manufacturing. And finally, gender. We can observe this gender differentiation when assigning tasks to the workers, but they, theoretically speaking, verbally, they're communicated, they're strictly related to specialization of workers. But now it's up to us to think about what influences the specialization of workers. There may be other attitudes or other influences that can have this impact on gender. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Simona, thank you very, very much. This perhaps because I've been involved in this project, it's so rich, and I have so many insights by listening to you five all along. We've seen this polarization, because when you say highly specialized or no specialized or very low skills, it's a process of polarization. When we initially talked, Simona, also the innovation attitude, we were concerned about this idea, and the financial possibilities is something that we've seen in developing countries. Clearly in Mexico, the other case we've done outside Europe, and what Shiva has presented. And there were also this idea that the takt time and the pace, these ideas also are appearing. So it is, in a way, we have the overlap of long-term gender segregation and stereotypes overlapped, I don't know, fused, as we've seen in the footwear industry, with these trends that are very concrete, that have to do with the work process, the production process, and the capital that we have. So many threads to follow, but whilst we collect our thoughts, I would like to open the floor both here and in online, and I will ask for help on the online. So yes, please.
Thank you very much. It was really insightful presentations. And I was wondering, so when we talk about gender equality and also the process of automation, we know, as Valeria said, these are kind of fused because we already had gender differences before. And I was wondering, from all the research you have done, we know that there are mainly task replacement. And my question is there, where do women go? Do they go to more appreciated occupations that they perform, let's say, more appreciated tasks and more value, not only in terms of recognition, but in terms of equal pay or better pay in this case? Or where do they go? This is my first question. The second question, maybe addressing what Margarita highlighted, is more related to this key finding that points out that middle management decisions matter. And I was wondering if in that case, women are also taking those decisions and recognized by the company, also, again, in terms of respect and leadership, because that's where we have a bigger gender gap in terms of leadership positions, but also in terms of pay, again. And maybe that leads to the final question that is more related to policies that Jorge highlighted. We don't have barriers, but we have challenges. And in this case, my question maybe for all of you is what can be done and how can we achieve gender equality in this process of transformation and automatization that we see that these gender differences might increase and make bigger the gap? Thank you.
Thanks so much for that question. I will collect two more and then we go back to the speakers. Yes, please.
Sí, muchas gracias. La verdad es que ha sido una presentación apasionante porque tiene el nivel de granularidad adecuado para sacar conclusiones no teóricas, sino desde abajo, ¿no? de la realidad en la que nos enfrentamos. En ese sentido, me gustaría hacer una pregunta a las dos partes de esta presentación. La primera es en car manufacturing. Quería saber hasta qué punto las empresas que habéis visitado están anticipando el coche eléctrico y los coches autónomos, porque este es un cambio paradigmático, ¿no? Y hasta qué punto esa anticipación implica formación, inversión en nuevas tecnologías, etc. Y en relación a esto mismo también hay una cuestión interesante respecto al middle management que creo que Jorge ha suscitado, y es el cambio en la forma de gestionar de ese middle management que he querido entender se deriva de los procesos de automatización. La segunda pregunta es para el garment y shoemaking, ¿no? Hemos visto que, creo que lo habéis mencionado las dos, que hay un tema cultural de path dependency, ¿no? En un eje que podríamos llamar fuerza and dexterity, ¿no? En términos de gender. Desde el punto de vista de la automatización, ¿veis que se disuelve, como tú acabas de decir, esa diferencia y que por tanto se abren nuevas oportunidades para reequilibrar, digamos, las labores en términos de género? Y finalmente, algo que me preocupa mucho es que los procesos de automatización los cogéis en términos de la empresa y el mercado, ¿no? El mercado global, las tecnologías que existen. ¿Hasta qué punto el place-based importa? ¿Hasta qué punto estar en un sitio o en otro importa en la velocidad y el tipo de automatización al que las empresas recurren? Jorge ha mencionado esa alianza con la universidad local para soluciones tecnológicas específicas. ¿El place-based importa en los procesos de automatización? Gracias.
Thank you. Please take the floor.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Thank you for those presentations. They were very interesting. I just had, one question which kind of links to the first question. And the one is about concentration, right? So if we look at these firms, and I don't know how to frame this properly, but are we thinking about gender equality as parity within the different job levels? Or is it that, let's say a firm has 100 people and 50 work different jobs and they're women and 50 work different jobs and they're men? Is that not, I guess my question is more about how do we think about gender equality in the world of specialization and in automation, right? So is it about the type of job? Are we getting parity, or is it about the gender equity within the workspace broadly? And the other one is really about wages. I don't know if you looked at this, about when people do get into these automized roles, are you observing gender differences in the wages themselves, even if people are doing the same roles and so forth, but also not just that, the people who were there previously, are we observing a real change in wages as productivity, quote unquote, increases, or when jobs themselves are changing? I think, that was another question I had around, this automation question in relation to wage changes within our economy. Thank you.
Which is something that Shiva perhaps can elaborate upon. Given we don't have so much time, I would like to check whether there is any other issue that anyone here would like to raise, because I don't think we will have time for a second round of answers. So no, and online I don't see anyone. So I will give, those are complex enough questions and have to do with both the gender dimensions, the impacts of technology, and the de-skilling processes, but to the core of the question we had at the beginning, and perhaps all our speakers can reflect about this, whether we see or not, and what kind of displacement we see, and what is the gender equality that we would like to see. So Margarita, I will give you the floor, and I will follow the order, and you pick whatever you would like to pick from the questions.
Thank you very much, Valeria, and thank you for the questions. I will pick some issues, and in particular, the one on the one on task replacement and the decision, in particular, the decision issue. In the company where we observed this issue as core issue for the management, it was fantastic, the importance that they assigned to women, in the sense that team leaders and shift leaders are mainly women, and they intervene in the production process in the sense that they are leading the team of workers, and they set all the interventions on the robots. They program the robots not because they are expert in programming, but because they know what to do to set the appropriate program to be started. And they are at the core of this change in a new organization of work, in which they have to plan a daily meeting with all the people involved in logistics, in maintenance, in quality, together to define how to work with the daily need, the shift needs. So women can have a role, and they can have a role, and they are prepared to do that specifically. But a specific need is to prepare the man to be prepared to work in team appropriately. I jump to the policies. And I think that an essential point is to focus on work-life balance, because otherwise we can't discuss about women, increasing involvement of women, because they take care of kids, of older people, they take care of the family as a whole. And if there is no work-life balance, no recognitions of their special needs, we don't have any possibility of their involvement, full involvement. Some companies have specific work-life balances. For example, one of the two companies we interviewed, Copot, was absolutely mandatory for them, not only for women, just for men, for all people within the company. So the work-life balance is obviously something very important for women, but it's important for all the workers. I would conclude with the ecosystem, in the sense that it's absolutely important. The differences we found, for example, in Romania and in Spain, are crucial because, well, the two Romanian companies are two big OEMs, and for them, they are an enclave in the region. But for the companies we interviewed in Spain, they obviously continuously mention their external side of the company, and the external side is the ecosystem in which they work, providing them all the opportunities they need for implementing new solutions. But, and this is incredibly challenging, the OEMs in the area don't. They don't support their supplier in the innovation, and this is something that deserves attention, in the sense that their customers are not so keen to enhance the quality of their suppliers, because that is the precondition, I would say, to play on competition among the suppliers. Wages, we didn't discuss about wages because we were not no, we are not discussing about wages during the interviews. there was a general improvement of wages, not because there was a reduction of costs or because there were greater profits, but simply because there was an enhancement of the job profile, and those job profiles had higher wages. That was a general information we received in all the companies. Thank you.
Jorge?
Sí, bueno, thank you so much for the questions and the interventions. And just in order to understand the Mexican case, this type of virtuous circle is highly dependent on demand. So as soon as demand is increasing, you can have this linear trajectory between production, employment, and automation and digitalization. So for the industry is in a real in-depth transforming situation right now, because the connectivity, diversity, autonomy, and electrification is taking place in all over. So the main issue is the timing, because state regulation is very strong in different places and contexts, not in all of them, but I mean, for the Mexican case, is quite an issue, because in most of the states and there is a federal and also California and other regulations very high, and but this is a tension with the consumer preference. So in order to have a high connectivity and a good car, you don't need to have an electric car. It could be a combustion. So it's a real tension. And as soon as the price is quite different, it's a gap. But it will change. It will change. So for production matter, is not a big deal. So companies in Mexico, as well, I think, generally speaking, is well prepared for the transition, because it's less complex. It's more simple, the production. Of course, there is more technology, especially in the batteries, etc. But for assembly, is not a big issue. Talking about gender, for the companies that we study, but this is a trend in some, at least in the industry in Mexico. Gender inclusion is a trend, no doubt, and what we have seen is same task, same payment, same salaries. But the polarization is, I mean, the gap is between how many women in terms of radio are in the higher positions. So this is a gap, but at least in the OEMs, it's a clear perception that they need to be balanced. Why is that? Well, I think it's needed, and they can understand the context. So finally, the context. The context, I think, is one of the most important factors or indicators to understand differences in terms of sector, regions, etc. So sociologists and also economists, we do micro. It's fun to have diversity. So so the context is quite an important in order to understand this automation and these gaps between genders and skills, and the context is quite different. Not so for the Bulgaria Mexico case, we have quite different situations along the country. Even though could be for export in the north, but we have a very different situations, and sometimes, for instance, Union could explain a lot of these issues for understanding specific context. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. Shiva?
Shall I go now, Valeria?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you for the very interesting questions. I'll try to answer a few of them. So in terms of the question of where do women go? So, I assume that this is a question about the shop floor, that once some task is automated, that, where do the women who were who were doing that prior to that, where do they go on the shop floor? So, we don't have systematic data on this, but what we understood was that those women are then moved to other labor-intensive tasks on the shop floor. So there isn't sort of a fixed kind of movement. And I think, the firms, this is at least for the shoe firms, for instance, that the managers are really trying to create a more flexible workforce. So workers have training to be able to do multiple tasks. And these are the workers that tend to get paid more and that are more valued because they can be moved around flexibly. And we know that women are mostly concentrated in the labor-intensive, sewing, etc. Tasks, sewing, cutting, etc. So they would be moved to one of those lines and would be aiding in that task. So in terms of there was an interesting question on gender parity and gender equality in specialization, and what are we really looking for? I think this is a very good question, and I think we should keep foregrounding it, because I think we are looking for gender parity in terms of both horizontal segregation as well as vertical segregation, right? So we want to have gender parity across sectors, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in services, because we know that women in manufacturing as well as in services, right, tend to be concentrated in very few sectors as compared to men. And those sectors are generally, very, have certain gendered notions attached to them. So women are in hospitality or in nursing. In manufacturing, they're more, in types of jobs that require quote unquote nimble fingers, or, the assumption that women are more dexterous. So I think we need to be looking at that spread, but we also need to be looking at the vertical segregation. And, I didn't present this in my talk, but we got some numbers from one of the factories in terms of the gender distribution of employment in terms of occupation within the firm. And even though men are only 33% of the total workers in one of the shoe factories, they make up 49% of supervisors, 46% of department heads, and women, who are 67% of the workforce, are only 51% of supervisors and 54% of department heads. So even here we see very clearly there's this division. So this needs to be addressed, because this is really where the differences in wages becomes important, and which takes me then to the question on wages, which I think was also very interesting, because in our discussions internally, I remember Valeria making this statement that the minimum wage is the maximum wage. And I think if you had to sum up what our research has found, I think this does it really, really well, because the firms are really, they are automating partly just to keep up with the increase in the national minimum wage or the regional minimum wage, right? So they're just doing enough in order to make sure that they're meeting the very minimum requirement, right? So it's, everyone starts off there, and then there are small performance bonuses for workers who are multi-skilled, but they're very small percentage of the total wage. And there are no clear kind of wage gains for workers in terms of automation, right? It's just about doing the bare minimum to make sure that you're legally compliant. And in terms of how do we achieve gender equality in terms of policy, I think one of the important things we need to look at is gender segregation in education, because I think that's going to become increasingly important now with job polarization and with more specialization, especially with AI and robotic and digital technologies becoming more important. This is going to be key. And I think there also need to be better ways to monitor and address vertical segregation within firms. This is especially true for firms that are highly internally segregated and industries, but also, of course, monitoring of segregation horizontally. So I'll leave it at that, perhaps we are running out of time. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Shiva. Simona?
Yes, thank you. So I would like to start first from automation point of view, but objectively. If we consider the machinery, the technology, it has been observed that cutting was mostly, for example, cutting was mostly male-dominated area because it was strength-intensive, physical force, dangerous, and so on. But now, by digitalizing the design and the cutting, most of the people in charge of the cutting section in the study establishment were women. But they were highly specialized. So they have decided to study this special work in order to do that. When analyzing Germany, one establishment in the sewing area, they have an equality, let's say, between men and female seamstresses. But there is a highly important note to analyze here is that they count a lot with foreign workers that in their countries, sewing is male oriented, sewing is male dominated. So is it gender differentiation now in this German establishment? Because there are good percentages of equality, we don't call it segregation or differentiation, but in the home country of these workers, it's male dominated. So is it? And to answer this dexterity part, in terms of sewing, they are developing already robots and nobody will have to sew. So I think in terms of objective analyzing automation, it could give the chance of equality. Now comes in line this specialization that doesn't necessarily depend on automation, I think so. According to your question, location is very important. Because as mentioned, the second establishment in Germany has decided strategically to put the establishment there in Germany due to the proximity to technology producers, due to the proximity to specialized workers in the area. So yes, it's very strategic. Also, they also count with the reshoring, they count with the label of made in Europe, of made in Germany, that will attract more their aimed consumers that would select more these products now, maybe if the prices increase. And referring to wages at the theoretical level, all the management teams have indicated that yes, automation will in the future bring profits. So at the moment they cannot affect the wages and how they treat the employees from the salary systems. So they plan to modify this salary system according to the profits that they will have when they will have the fully automated production process. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much. This has been an excellent panel, and it shows how much work we put. Remember that for each of the presenters, there is a country, a sector combination that has not been presented, and all this will lead to a comparative analysis that it will be published soon in the JRC ILO webpage that we have here. So here at the ILO, hosted at the ILO. So look for these publications and really thank you for the question. I think they have made us keep on thinking. So a big round of applause for our speakers. And thank you for all of those who kept with us online. We will reconvene in 55 minutes, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.